Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on what time you're watching this. As promised, this is a short video that looks at the second of the two essays that you'll be writing. Now, there is a third one. I call it a reflection essay, which is pretty straightforward. This is a reflection on your favorite topic that we covered this term. But let's focus on the second, the slightly longer essay. And this is an essay that's worth 25% of the final mark. It's about 1,000 to 1,200 words. I know that it's due this Sunday. I had originally mentioned at one point it was going to be due, I believe, on the 30th. That was my mistake. But here's what I'm willing to do. If you're getting crushed with other assignments, because it is coming up to the end of the term, there's only a couple of more weeks to go, contact me, let me know. If you're only taking this course and this Sunday is fine, the 23rd, then go ahead and hand it in. But if you are really feeling the pinch, let me know and I can sort of accommodate you in one way or another. Because last week I wanted to make a video on this topic, but I was not feeling very well. I had a wicked stomach flu. Just been over for a few days, but I wanted to at least make this video for you. So let's take a look at the idea behind the second essay, the learning outcomes, the instructions, and so on. And much like the first one, the second essay will give you an opportunity to reflect on some of the ideas and content that we've looked at in the second half of the course. So this includes social contract theory, the Scottish Enlightenment, Hegelianism, Marxism and the Age of Revolution, Schopenhauer and Kierkegaard, Nietzsche. You could look at existentialism, the situationists. There's a whole range of things, but there are kind of four main areas: social contract thinking, Scottish Enlightenment, and of course Hegelianism, Marxism, and the Age of Revolution all sort of stem from that. Schopenhauer and Kierkegaard, and then their influence on Nietzsche. So that's kind of where they're all connected. Now, having said that, students preserve the right to, one, devise their own original essay topic. Now, if you are going to try to hand it in this coming Sunday and you want to come up with something new, again, please contact me ASAP so I can say, yes, it's doable. Now, typically I don't turn down students, but what I do is try to shape it into something that's doable within 1,000 to 1,200 words, because that's still only roughly 4 pages, 5 at the maximum. So it's not a lot, but if you want to come up with your own topic, let me know to make sure that it is doable. 2, you can also modify the essay topics that are described below. And again, if it's going to be a radical modification, let me know. But if it's pretty well following the dictates of the question, then that's perfectly fine. Okay, so course learning outcomes: students defend their position with reasoned critical thinking, communicate clearly, concisely, correctly, in this case, a written format, and addresses the needs of the audience, myself. And students will respond to a written message in a manner that ensures effective communication. This would be writing with a structure that follows an introduction, a conclusion, body paragraphs in between, body paragraphs with in-text citation from your secondary sources. That's very, very important. Okay, so there are some different topics you can look at. There's 6 in total. The last one's on the second page. Okay, so the first one is social contract theorists argue that laws must be posited by individuals in order for society to function with any kind of predictability or stability, something that the state of nature never had, right? No predictability or stability. So who has a better understanding of how a social contract should operate? Do you think it was Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, or Rousseau? Which one of those 3 thinkers really kind of had a handle on what constitutes a good social contract? 2, does Hegel's integrated notion of spirit, now spirit or Geist as he calls it in German, spirit integrates psychology, the state, economics, history, art, religion, the individual, and philosophy, literally every expression that is known to us, to humanity, in one big comprehensive package. The whole thing is all tied together in, under the rubric of spirit, right? Expressions of our humanity is essentially what it is. Does that notion still make sense today? Is this something that we can sort of buy into? Because we do live in a much more fragmented world, a multicultural world, a world that is really kind of broken up in complementary pieces, we'll say. So the notion of spirit is kind of counterintuitive to this. Now, I'm not saying right off the bat that the notion of spirit doesn't exist. Perhaps it exists in a different way. So that's what I'd like you to explore. Does the notion of spirit still make sense today? Is Hegelianism still relevant to us today? Number 3, while Sartre and Beauvoir write about ambiguity and moral choices, Karl Marx instead argues that a philosopher's task is not to try to interpret the world, but to change it. Hegel, on the other hand, believes that a philosopher's task is simply to report what he or she sees after the fact. So no mucking in, getting your hands dirty, changing the world. You simply report what you see once you return to your desk. So which approach is the better way to philosophize? Do we try to write about the ambiguity and moral choices that we face? Do we go and change the world rather than interpret it? Or do we do like Hegel and simply interpret and not change the world? So which one of these do you think is the better way to philosophize? Does philosophy stop being philosophy when it turns into social reforms, policy planning, a revolution, or simply prescribing particular modes of behavior? So when does philosophy stop being philosophy? Is it when when it's acted upon, or when it becomes kind of our guidelines or our template by which we live? So which one of these might be the best way to go about interacting with the world? 4, one of the most compelling arguments put forth by Nietzsche is that life is a constant struggle against false morality, hypocrisy, and the excessive control of human activity by religion. We spend our entire lives trying to become a master rather than a slave of ourselves. Is Nietzsche's agenda about being masters without slaves still possible? In other words, do we still have any control over our lives? Are we at the mercy of capitalist imperatives? Are we at the mercy of peer pressure, social media, our self-image? Do we have the possibility to be masters without slaves? And this is an important key because those are otherwise trigger words. Master and slave, they should be. But Nietzsche is arguing that we can be masters of our own lives, our destiny, our future, our well-being. In other words, we have control over our lives. Is that something that's still possible? 5, one of the reasons why existentialism is no longer discussed is because these ideas and attitudes have embedded themselves so deeply into modern culture that we hardly think of them as existentialists anymore. So pick one philosopher. You can look at Schopenhauer, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Sartre, or de Beauvoir, because each of them talk about existentialism or existence in different ways, and examine how their ideas in terms of how they relate to postmodern issues regarding anxiety, ambiguity, authenticity, right? Living a true life, a real life, bad faith, which is an idea that Sartre presents in his writings about people that could change their lives but choose not to because they either think they can't or they think that others will see them differently. So to have bad faith is to live sort of inauthentically. The question of freedom. Is freedom the same as liberty? And ultimately, what does it mean to be a human being? Now, it says 2022. This was last year, 2023. But you can think about last year as well. So existentialism and existentialist thought really has permeated our cultural landscape. And it's not until you stop and think about a certain phrase that you go, yeah, that's kind of part of existentialist thinking. So if that's the case, pick one of these philosophers that I've just listed and see how their ideas relate to the world today, this postmodern world, in terms of the things that we experience. Of course, following a pandemic, we're going to be anxious. We're ambiguous, or the future is ambiguous. How do we live authentically and not in bad faith? How do we express our freedom and liberties? And finally, how do we live as fully human beings? That's basically the question. Now, remember, that's going to be answered in 1,000 to 1,200 words. So if you pick that one, really focus on one of those aspects, one or two Perhaps if they're related, anxiety and ambiguity, those two things fit together. Authenticity and bad faith fit together. So the last one here, what is the main focus of the Situationist International? What did it seek to change in the world through revolutionary means? So how did dérive, détournement, and psychogeography fit into the revolutionary project? This is the last group of individuals that we're going to look at in this course on the Situationists. Truth be told, I have a second book coming out on the Situationists this fall. This is the group I've been following now for several years. They disbanded in 1972, but their work, I think, is still very, very relevant. So the question is in the essay, what was the main focus of the SI? What were they trying to address, change, transform, solve? What was it that they were trying to do? What was it they wanted to change in the world through these revolutionary means? And again, the word revolutionary, it's maybe should be in quotations, because at one point they were thinking of actual revolutions, and then eventually it became a cultural revolution. And without a social revolution, there can be no cultural revolution. So the various ideas that they present, dérive, which is French for basically drifting, right? To dérive through life, to drift through life. Détournement, which means detouring, or sometimes even just hijacking, changing the course of something is what a détournement is. And in psychogeography, the critical awareness of how one's environment affects our psychological makeup, our mental, physical well-being. Those are all things that I think are still important today, because especially psychogeography, depending on where we live and the events around us, they do color in one way or another our outlook, right? Our feelings, or our lack of anxiety, or the absolute full-blown case of anxiety. So those are basically the 6 main topics. Again, students reserve the right to come up with their own, and you can modify what's there as well. But I would say that if it's an essay that's 1,000 to 1,200 words, really keep it laser focused, because the questions are fairly open-ended. So you can do different things with it. But if you pick one of those 6, try to focus in on 1 or 2 things, because it's much more doable. Now, please use secondary sources. Please cite those secondary sources in your in-text paragraphs. If you write in APA or MLA format, or even the Chicago style, it doesn't matter. Just be consistent. Make sure that you have a brief introduction, a title, so I know what it is you're trying to do, because nothing is more frustrating for an instructor than to have to read through the entire essay to kind of figure out what the student's trying to do. So it'd be much better for you to state clearly in your title and in your introduction what it is you're trying to accomplish. What is it that you want to look at? So that's important. Full paragraphs using proper paragraph style with a topic sentence, proper grammar, punctuation, and mechanics. But more than anything else, please use in-text citations for your secondary sources. I need to see them at work. Now, because it's a research essay, don't panic if you look at it and turn it in. It's at 25%. That should be roughly what it is, because you are using secondary sources to basically support your arguments. And so if I don't see that, I don't know if you've used anything. But if your essay lights up like a Christmas tree and turn it in, that's not good. So use secondary sources. I would say an essay of about 1,000 words, I would expect maybe 5 sources. That's reasonable. Do not use Wikipedia, please. Just don't, because it changes all the time. Please use proper secondary sources. And again, I think I mentioned this the first time. You can use Wikipedia, but scroll down to the bottom and use the footnotes. Click on the footnotes if there's a link, because it'll likely take you to the book or the essay or the article or the chapter that's being quoted. I don't even know if you use Wikipedia, but there you are. You're using the sources. So please, 1, use sources. 2, cite them properly. And 3, please refrain from using Wikipedia. Please use proper sources. Using Google Scholar is probably one of the best ways to go about doing this. Okay, if you are getting crushed with assignments, please contact me and let me know, and I can move the submission date a little bit further. The only reason why I moved it to where it was is that I wanted to give you a week off between this essay and the last one, which is a reflection essay. Now, it's a lot easier. It only needs to be a couple of pages. It doesn't need secondary sources, but it's basically a reflection on which topic did you think was really interesting in the course. That's essentially it. Okay, so any questions, please contact me immediately and we'll get it sorted out. In the meantime, we'll see each other, or we'll talk again, if not next week, then very soon. So take care, and we'll see each other very soon. Bye-bye.